Alright guys, so for today's lesson, you are going to be learning about solving quadratics by factoring. So if you remember, factoring is basically all what we did last unit. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking that and applying it to solving for quadratics. But before we do that, there's a couple things that we need to go over, I guess kind of some vocab words. So if you look here, when solving a quadratic, you're always finding specifically the roots, which is the same thing as the zeros. So what that means is the roots are the zeros, is where the graph of your quadratic crosses the x-axis. So basically, it's when y would be 0. So if you have a quadratic function and you want to find the roots, you would make y 0 and solve for x. So that's kind of the idea behind today. So we're going to do a few examples to get the idea. So this first example here, this is actually a quadratic that's already factored. As if you can tell, we've got x minus 2 times x plus 5. So we have these two binomials. So basically, it's like having a quadratic that we already factored out. And again, we're setting it equal to 0 because we want to find the roots. Well, here's how you get the roots when setting a quadratic equal to 0. First of all, since it's a quadratic, that means it's squared. So the biggest exponent is x squared. That means you're going to need to have two roots. So what you have to do is you have to consider the fact that if you're multiplying two things together, because that's what each of these are. If you were to plug in x, you would get a number here and you would get a number here. Well, to get 0 when you multiply by a number, you have to be multiplying by 0. That's the only way you're going to get 0. So that means either x minus 2, that has to equal 0, or the x plus 5 has to equal 0. So the way we go about a problem like this is you take x minus 2 and you set equal to 0, and you take x plus 5 and you set equal to 0. This is going to give us our two roots. So here we're solving for x. So if we're solving for x, that means we need to add 2 to both sides. So when you do that, x ends up being 2. So that's 1, and then we got to do the same thing over here. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides because it's being added. So then you end up with x equals negative 5. So your two solutions would be 2 and negative 5. So here's how we know this works. You can plug it in. So let's say we start with the 2 and we plug in 2. Well, if you plug in 2, it becomes 2 minus 2 times 2 plus 5 equals 0. And then when we multiply these together, if we get 0, we did it correctly. Well, 2 minus 2 is 0. 2 plus 5 is 7. 0 times 7 is 0. We did it correctly. You could also check it with the negative 5. So let's say you plug in negative 5. Well, if you plug in negative 5, you have negative 5 minus 2 times negative 5 plus 5 equals 0. Negative 5 minus 2 is a negative 7. Negative 5 plus 5 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. We're good. So that's the idea here, guys. Basically, when you multiply two things together, one of them has to be 0. So you're going to always get the two roots. Okay? So that's one example. Let's go ahead and look at a couple more. We're going to look at a couple examples that aren't factored out now. Okay, so let me show you some of those. So our next example here, again, we're solving for 0. So we have this quadratic. We have x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. And we need to start by factoring this x squared plus 3x minus 4. Notice, the number that would be in front of your x squared is a 1, which means you can use the shortcut when factoring. So what you need to do is you need to find the factors of negative 4 that add up to a positive 3. So you're going to have either negative 1 and 4 or negative 2 and 2. Well, it's going to be negative 1 and positive 4 because negative 1 plus 4 gives you a positive 3. So our factors are negative 1 and 4. So this is where you would go and take x minus 1 and then x plus 4, which equals 0. Now we're to what we just did. So now we need to take the x minus 1 and the x plus 4 and set both of those equal to 0. So we're going to take x minus 1, set it equal to 0, and x plus 4, set it equal to 0. Here we want to add 1 to both sides. So x ends up being 1 here. We want to subtract 4 here. So x is negative 4. So those would be your two solutions. So again, since it's a quadratic, since it's got that x squared, you're always going to have two solutions. And you can check these as well. You can take, let's say we take the 1. Let's plug in 1 to your equation. So it becomes 1 squared plus 3 times 1 minus 4. And we need that to equal to 0. Well, 1 squared is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Minus 4 is 0. 1 plus 3 is 4. Minus 4. 0 equals 0. We're good. You could also do that with the negative 4. Okay. So there are your two solutions for that situation. The last situation we're going to look at is this last example here, where it's 2x squared minus 8x equals 0. And how you want to go about this problem is, notice there's not the last c term. So in this situation, we're going to factor out a GCF. You should be able to see right away that 2 and x can go into both of these. So I can divide both of these by a 2x. So then you're going to pull out your GCF. So I'm going to pull out the 2x, and then left, 2 divided by 2 is 1. X squared divided by x is x. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. X divided by x is just 1. And then that equals 0. So here's where it's a little different. We have an x minus 4 and a 2x. What you do is you take both of these. You take the 2x, the GCF, and the x minus 4 and set it equal to 0. So basically 2x would equal 0 and x minus 4 would equal 0. So this one's a little bit more different because it's a 2x instead of like an x plus 2. So now we're just still solving for x. So here we would need to divide both sides by 2. Well, anything divided by 0 is 0 divided by anything is 0. So one solution would be 0. And then here we need to add 4. So then the other solution ends up being 4. So that's the idea, guys. This is how you solve quadratics using factoring. If you're struggling with factoring, because I know it's been a while for some of us, my advice for you is go back to the old stuff and rewatch those videos on how to factor. Get a little bit extra practice. But really, this isn't anything super new. What you're doing, though, is once you've factored, you're just taking your two factors and you're setting them equal to 0 and solving. So that's really the new piece here. So hopefully this helped. You have a Canvas check that you're doing as like your homework for this assignment. Everything is due from this week on Monday by noon. So make sure you get that done. Have a good day. Bye.